Death is a theme that has haunted human thought for millennia. From the ancient world to modern times, philosophers, poets, and thinkers have grappled with the inescapable end that awaits us all. History is filled with reflections on mortality, with examples that have become emblematic of our struggle to find meaning in the face of death. Take for instance the trial and death of Socrates, a moment immortalized in philosophy, almost mythologized in its importance. Socrates' acceptance of his fate, his willingness to face death with composure, offers one of the earliest examples of confronting mortality. It poses the question, what does it mean to live a life of integrity when death looms over everything we do? Then there's the existentialist perspective, which forces us to confront our mortality in a more personal and perhaps unsettling way. As human beings, we are faced with the stark choice to either despair over the certainty of death or, as Kierkegaard suggests, to take a leap of faith. This leap, in Kierkegaardian terms, involves placing trust in the sacrosanct vitality of the cosmos, in the mysterious forces of life, evolution, and the divine, even though they remain beyond our full understanding. This is where Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death enters the picture. While Becker was not a philosopher in the traditional sense, his work engages deeply with both philosophical and psychological traditions. Becker's central thesis is the following: that all of human behavior, our craving for meaning, our cultural practices, and our anxieties arise from an unconscious fear of death. He argues that we deny death, and this denial shapes the very structures of our societies. By creating elaborate systems, religious, cultural, and psychological, we attempt to distract ourselves from the terrifying reality of our own mortality. In this video, we'll dive into Becker's bold ideas about how humans cope with the fear of death and explore how his work connects with the rich history of philosophical thought on this most profound of human concerns. Western society since Newton, no matter how scientific or secular it claims to be, is still as religious as any other. According to Becker, civilized society is a hopeful collection of beliefs and actions, where people protest against their insignificance by clinging to science, money, and material goods, believing these things make them count for more than any other animal. Everything that humans do is, at its core, religious and heroic. An attempt to transcend the limitations of their physical existence, yet always in danger of being fictitious and fallible. Becker uses the concept of organismic narcissism, which stems from his understanding of human development, particularly through his understanding of the work of Freud and Rank. Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, introduced the idea that the child's early psychological development is driven by the quest for security and self-worth. From birth, the infant is helpless and dependent on caregivers for survival. This dependency creates a fundamental need for love, attention, and validation, what Freud identified as the child's struggle for a secure sense of self, rooted in feelings of self-esteem. Otto Rank, one of Freud's early disciples, took these ideas further, arguing that the primary human conflict stems not from sexuality, but from the fear of death. For Rank, the child's need for self-esteem is the foundation of all heroic striving, our basic existential project to overcome the terror of death. Becker builds on this idea, suggesting that our drive for self-worth is not only about survival in the biological sense, but also about transcending our mortal condition. The child's narcissistic need for self-esteem is deeply tied to the human need to feel significant, to matter, and to be remembered. This is what Becker calls the heroic project. Society itself is a codified system of heroism, offering various roles, beliefs, and achievements through which individuals can assert their value and deny death. These heroic projects, which Becker calls immortality projects, are essentially ways for us to convince ourselves that we are not simply finite beings, bound to die and be forgotten. Through our accomplishments, creations, or by contributing to something larger than ourselves, whether it's a nation, a religion, or even a family name, we attempt to secure a sense of permanence. The problem is, These immortality projects are fragile and fleeting, constantly threatened by the reality of death. Becker emphasizes that these pursuits, no matter how great, are ultimately attempts to obscure the truth of our mortality. Becker even goes so far as to suggest that if everyone were to admit their urge to be a hero, it would unleash a devastating truth. To become fully conscious of what one is doing to earn this sense of heroism is, in his view, the central self-analytic problem of life. This insight forces people to recognize the fragile, often illusory nature of the systems they use to affirm their significance. Yet Becker acknowledges this quest is universal and even unavoidable. Society cannot function properly without offering these hero systems that give individuals a sense of worth within a collective framework. This drives Becker to pose the fundamental question he asks in this book. Why is the world such a terrible place that humans feel the need to escape from it? Why do people go to such lengths to avoid confronting the reality of death, rather than facing it openly and bravely? The answer, Becker suggests, lies in the very core of the human condition. For centuries, philosophers have searched for the essence of man, hoping to discover some unique substance or special quality that makes human beings distinct. But, as Becker points out, Erich Fromm, another influential thinker, argues that man has no essence. Fromm believes that what makes us unique is precisely this paradoxical nature. Humans are half animal and half symbolic. This idea, which traces back to Kierkegaard's book, The Concept of Anxiety, captures the central paradox of our existence. On one hand, we share the biological, animalistic nature of all living creatures. We are driven by survival, physical needs, and instinct. But on the other hand, we possess something more, a symbolic identity, a self-awareness that allows us to reflect on our existence and project meaning into the world. It is this awareness that curses us with the knowledge of our own mortality, a knowledge that no other animal has to bear. The origin of this idea traces back to Kierkegaard's analysis of the biblical Adam and Eve myth, where the original sin of eating the fruit of knowledge represents the dawning of human self-consciousness, the awareness of death. This existential awakening burdens man with a unique form of suffering. He becomes aware not only of his life, but also of his inevitable death. Man's tragedy lies in his ability to live in two worlds, the animal world, where survival is the only concern, and the symbolic world, where meaning, identity, and the denial of death dominate his thoughts. Becker encapsulates this dilemma perfectly, and I quote, "Man is literally split in two. He has an awareness of his own splendid uniqueness, in that he sticks out of nature with a towering majesty. And yet, at the end of his lifetime, he goes back into the ground to rot and disappear forever. It is a terrifying dilemma to be in and to have to live with." This dual nature, as Becker describes, is a source of constant psychological conflict. Humans are aware of their splendid uniqueness, the sense that they are more than mere animals, that their lives are significant in some unique way. Yet, despite this sense of importance, they must ultimately return to the ground, indistinguishable from any other decaying organism. This contradiction is at the heart of the human condition, and it's no wonder that for many, simply contemplating this thought could drive them to despair, or even madness. Or as the French philosopher Pascal describes it, men are so necessarily mad that not to be mad would amount to another form of madness. The existential dualism, the clash between our symbolic selves and our animal mortality, creates an impossible situation for the human mind to reconcile. It's a problem without a solution, an excruciating dilemma that haunts us. Faced with this terrifying reality, human life is dedicated to escaping this knowledge through the hero projects, which we described earlier in this video. These projects can take many forms, pursuing fame, wealth, power, or even moral righteousness. In fact, nearly every aspect of human civilization, from social institutions to personal ambitions, is in some way an attempt to deny death. And they come at a cost. We drive ourselves into a kind of blind obliviousness through social games, psychological tricks, and personal preoccupations, which are often far removed from the reality of our situation. In this way, much of what we consider normal human activity can be seen as a kind of madness, a shared collective delusion that shields us from the terrifying truth of our mortality. Becker's argument is clear. All human striving, all the ways we seek to elevate ourselves are ultimately forms of distraction from the horrifying reality that we will one day cease to exist. The heroic projects we undertake may bring temporary relief or meaning, but they are ultimately fragile constructs designed to protect us from the terror we refuse to face. And that wraps up the first part of this video series on the denial of death. If you want to be notified when the next part comes out, please hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, feel free to check out some of our other videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.